This like debunks the whole premise of the criticism. Worse. That is literally why she was 464th, like once again. And that is why her results were so bad. Except it's not real. I can't. I genuinely can't. I can't watch this video until the end. Once again, we've seen is not true. But yeah, so like we're dealing with Schrodinger's athlete here. Amazing.
Okay, I think we are getting to the point. Like, I don't see any sort of like scientific dismantling here, or discussion of the pharmacology used, or the actual hormone levels.
I mean, you dismissed some of the more interesting points with disingenuous arguments. Like, the whole narrative is false. In 2018, before she started hormone therapy, she was hot take. I don't know yet. I don't know yet if I have a take at all. The one hot take that I could have, but it's not a hot take as much as it's just an observation of some of the science. It seems like testosterone is not the key to sexual dimorphism and different performance between male and female athletes. There are some studies that say it is, some studies that contradict it, but in particular there was this one article I found that, or scientists rather, that focused on women presenting athletes who have the XY chromosomes. So basically they have an androgen receptor mutation, which means that their androgen receptors do not react to testosterone in their body. So the logic of that scientist, which makes a lot of sense on paper, is that if you have mutated androgen receptors and testosterone doesn't affect your the sexual expression of your body, then it probably doesn't really affect your muscles either. It doesn't affect the development of your body, basically. And yet the women who have the androgen receptor failure mutation rather are overly represented in the highest tier of women's athletics. So, and they do have higher levels of testosterone. It's just that the receptors for the testosterone don't work. So it's obviously not the testosterone that's actually this decisive factor. You get what I mean? So that scientist was specifically speculating on the nature of what else the Y chromosome adds, whether it's extra growth hormone, other aspects of dimorphism. I don't know. Let me see if I can find that specific article again. I'll read it on stream. Yeah, it's this one. If you give a person testosterone, society considers it a performance enhancer. If you naturally have lots of the hormone, though, it's a competitive advantage if you're a man. If you're a woman, at least according to some of the biggest sports associations in the world, it's just plain unfair. Female athletes like champion sprinters Caster Semenya and Duty Chand have had to fight in recent years for the right to compete as women because their natural testosterone levels are far higher than the average woman's. This is actually something I was thinking of like before reading more about this. I had this thought that instead of doing like male-female categories for sports, of just categorizing by hormone levels, which introduces a whole other set of problems. But what are the actual ratios? I genuinely don't know. I guess we could look up the International Association of Athletics Federations and the International Olympic Committee limits on the amount of testosterone these women are allowed to have in their bloodstream. If I recall correctly, they mention it later on. But how much variance is there in testosterone between the top guys, etc.? A lot. They talk about it later in the article. There is a lot of variance in testosterone. In fact, ironically, a lot of male top performers are underneath the minimum testosterone level given by those athletic associations. But every time a new ruling comes up, a debate flares in its wake. Many researchers agree with the IAF and IOC, but many also think that separating men and women by their testosterone levels alone flies in the face of scientific evidence. Despite all the debate, though, there hasn't been much of any conclusion about what the science actually says about testosterone's effect on women's athletic performance. And that's for a good reason. There isn't much conclusive evidence at all. Let me double check the date. Yeah, 2019, okay. So there could be newer research, since this is 2019. When it comes to nailing down a link between testosterone and athletic performance, part of the problem is that, to put it simply, human bodies are complicated. We know that among elite athletes, men seem to have a consistent 10 to 12% athletic advantage over women, which also depends on sports. I was reading a Twitter thread, I think it was yesterday. Someone was pointing out that it might seem kind of niche, but I think it's worth pointing out. There are specific sports where women seem to actually have an advantage over men. Specifically, the two examples I remember off the top of my head were skeet shooting, so stuff with fine motor skills, and extreme like ultra marathons, stuff where it's just pure endurance on a very, very long exertion. Lots of people chalk that up to testosterone alone, but the truth is there are many other factors, from other hormones to societal conditioning, that might boost athletic performance, making it difficult to pinpoint exactly what testosterone does for athletes. But one option to try to isolate testosterone's effect is to give people extra hormones and look to see what impact that has on the person's performance. So the societal conditioning also is probably underestimated in most people's, how to put it, judgment of the situation. The problem with societal conditioning is that we see greatly dimorphic, for example, results in athletic pursuits that shouldn't have any sexual dimorphism. Esports, intellectual competitions, like chess, stuff like that. I'll just say esports in general. I'll count chess as esports. Like, there is no biological reason for women to perform worse. It's purely societal, learned, systemic issues at play there. One recent study showed that female runners given topical testosterone cream increased their time to exhaustion, one measure of athletic ability. The study got a lot of traction for supposedly showing how high testosterone would give women a competitive advantage. But studies like these aren't really that relevant to a discussion of hormones naturally produced by the body. Adding extra testosterone, called exogenous testosterone, is essentially just doping. In the broadest sense, we've always known that doping increases athleticism, says Katrina Karkazis, a senior research fellow with the Global Health Justice Partnership at Yale University and co-author of Testosterone, an unauthorized biography. While the molecule is the same, it's not the same to put T in the body as it is to have exogenous T. When you add it, you get more bang for the buck, because the body isn't used to it. So if you can't study testosterone by giving it to people, you have to look at natural hormone levels and whether those correlate with performance. Men have it in far higher quantities than do most women, and conventional thinking has long held that this is the primary reason that men tend to outperform women athletically. There are certainly a number of factors that affect athletic performance, and testosterone is certainly only one of those factors, says Joanna Harper. However, if you're looking for factors that differentiate male performance from female performance, the majority of biologists feel that testosterone is the primary factor that distinguishes that. Oh, she's a medical physicist who focuses on trans athletes. Okay. Yeah, I see a lot of memes about it. One saying she worked her balls off to get there. Yeah, something people have been ignoring a lot, which I myself didn't know about until I stumbled upon an interview with her where she explains it. When she competed as a man in 2018, she had top 8 finishes in all the competitions. This idea that she was number 498 competing as a man and then number 1 competing as a woman is actually really wrong. My understanding, and I might be wrong on the details, I've only started researching it, but my understanding is that this result where she was 500th in a competition was when she competed as a male, but she had already started hormone treatment. So she was actually undergoing an anti-doping hormonal effect and competing with male athletes. When she competed with male athletes without the hormone treatment, she actually performed the top of her category. So that also pokes a big hole in this idea that she's only winning because she got assigned male at birth. Anyways, that idea, Harper explains, is based on the theory that testosterone increases 2 key attributes: strength and aerobic capacity, that is, your body's ability to get oxygen to your muscles. Testosterone is a powerful anabolic hormone. It helps you build lean muscle mass significantly, so it tends to boost your generalized strength, especially in areas like the upper body where your muscles have more receptors for it. It's also a driver of red blood cell count, and the more red blood cells you have, the more oxygen you can carry to your muscles, increasing your aerobic capacity. It seems to follow logically, then, that testosterone would boost your athletic ability generally. And if that were true, we'd expect to find a strong correlation with performance and testosterone. And we do not. If you start to look at men who are competing across a professional level, you cannot predict their performance based on their testosterone levels, says Richard Holt, a professor of endocrinology at the University of Southampton. The male range goes from 10 to 25 nanomoles per liter, And you can't say that a person with a level of 25 is necessarily going to outperform a man with a level of 10. The same goes for women, he explains, which suggests that it's not testosterone alone that's contributing to men's athletic advantage. It's not clear yet exactly what other factors might be contributing, but Holt notes that we can get some clues by looking at women with androgen receptor mutations. Oh, that's what I was talking about earlier. Androgens are a group of hormones including testosterone and estrogen that influence sex traits. It's testosterone that determines whether a developing baby will have male or female genitalia. Its presence helps prompt the embryo to go down the male route. But some people are born with mutations in their androgen receptors that make them non-functional, so even though they're producing testosterone, it can't actually affect anything. These people mostly develop and live life as women, often not even realizing they have the male XY chromosome pattern. In severe cases, they have female external genitalia, although also internal testes, though in more mild cases the genitalia can be mixed. What's strange is that women with androgen receptor mutations are extremely overrepresented among elite athletes, even though those with severe cases can't possibly be getting the benefit of their natural testosterone without receptors to carry out those effects. Holt points out some of these women have even had their testes removed, bringing their testosterone levels to below female levels, and yet they're still able to compete internationally. Many researchers now think it's factors on the Y chromosome that account for some of those differences. Holt's own research suggests part of it might be growth hormone, which varies between men and women and plays important roles in muscle gain and repair, among other things. That could help explain why the research on natural testosterone levels has been so erratic. One study of professional male triathletes found no relationship between testosterone levels and performance. Another, looking at professional cyclists, found the same lack of correlation. Yet another, comparing cyclists, weightlifters, and controls to each other on a cycling test, found a negative correlation between testosterone levels and performance. A study of teenage weightlifters found no relationship between boys' testosterone levels and their performance, and a negative correlation among the girls, meaning they performed better when their testosterone was lower. Some studies have even found mixed or opposing results within their own findings. One found that sprinters seemed to get an advantage from testosterone, while other runners didn't. Another came to the conclusion that it helped female track athletes, but not male ones. There's also differences in results depending on what type of strength you look at. Endurance strength seems to decrease with higher testosterone levels, while maximum strength generally only increases. That's also what I was talking about earlier. Like, it also really depends on what kind of sport. Soy stream? Wait, how is this a soy stream? Complicating all of this is the fact that elite athletes' testosterone levels vary quite a lot. One analysis found that 25% of elite male athletes have testosterone levels below what the IAAF consider the lower limit for men. This is what I was talking about earlier. 25% of elite male athletes have testosterone levels beneath the lower limit for men, according to the International Association of Athletics Federations. So, like, yeah. Some of this data is pretty glaring. What's more, it wasn't the athletes in less strength or speed-oriented sports. Some of the events with the most men below the limit were powerlifting, rowing, track and field, ice hockey, and rowing. Basketball players and alpine skiers had some of the highest levels. That all seems to imply, at least to some researchers, that high testosterone isn't a universal performance booster. This is all in line with what Karakazis notes is a pattern of studies which claim to find broad links between testosterone and athletic performance, but have really only found minor correlations with very specific measures of athleticism. My Nito in picture. Yes, this is Iiro Mentiranta, the Finnish skier with an erythropoietin receptor mutation that increases his red blood cell count. The mixed results might explain why even broad review articles find opposing results. Reviews have suggested both that there is not enough evidence to enforce any upper testosterone limit in women, and that there is reason to apply a very specific one. Yeah, I agree, there are just so many things to take into consideration. Most studies seem to have a bit of biased opinions one way or another. I don't know about bias, but the studies are contradictory. constantly, which makes it really iffy that you have those sports organizations making like knee-jerk decisions on what's okay, what's not okay. There's simply not a lot of great research out there. As a result, Karkazis explains, researchers are forced to cobble together a picture of testosterone's role based on studies in men, women with differences of sexual development, called DSDs, which includes androgen receptor mutations, and anyone given exogenous testosterone. Peter Sonksen, a now retired professor of endocrinology at St. Thomas Hospital in King's College, London, has written extensively about testosterone's relative unimportance with regard to athletic performance in women without androgen receptor mutations. But he says when it comes to how the hormone might play a role in women with DSDs, the answer is that there is little or no credible science to answer the question. But none of this really addresses the issue at the heart of all of this, when it comes to formulating rules for who can. I think the problem here, Frank, is that when there's too many different factors at play, and you aren't sure which of them are relevant, which aren't, you aren't going to isolate the factor that you're trying to study correctly, and that will lead to those like very erratic results. So it doesn't necessarily mean that testosterone isn't a factor. It's just that as long as we don't have studies that properly isolate testosterone as the factor by taking into account all other factors and calculating them in, we can't know. Some researchers like Harper argue that there needs to be a specific limit on women's testosterone. Above that, and you'd need to go compete with men. But many others say this idea of fairness is fundamentally flawed. Eric Villain, director of the Center for Genetic Medicine Research at Children's National Hospital, says that even if testosterone does give certain women a performance boost, they can and should still compete with their fellow women. Sports relies on abilities that are fundamentally unfair, Villain says. Just as tiny gymnasts do better than tall ones, he explains, there are myriad factors that give some athletes advantages over others. For that reason, he says, within the female category, testosterone should be degendered. It is a hormone present in both genders, which is why continuity of gender should trump levels of testosterone. Holt agrees. It strikes me as far too simplistic to say that the only difference between men and women is their testosterone levels. If you're going to look at performance differences, he says, you also have to look at sociological ones. There are almost certainly biological differences that mean men will always outperform women to some degree, but he points out that teenage girls are much less likely to compete in sports at school than boys and are given generally worse facilities. Male athletes are paid much better than female ones on the whole. Holt says these and other factors mean that there are a whole load of sociological reasons that may also drive men to coach and be driven to achieve at a high level beyond testosterone. Besides, the idea that a naturally occurring variation in some women's bodies is somehow unfair does not mesh with how much we exalt male athletes with unusual abilities. Michael Phelps' muscles produce half the lactic acid of a normal person, enabling him to push himself much longer without fatigue. Finnish cross-country skier Iiro Mentiranta has an inherited mutation that increases his red blood cells' oxygen carrying capacity by 25 to 50%, which is the genetic equivalent of doping. Those men were celebrated, not pilloried. Sports are inherently unfair, and while there have to be some regulations to account for true cheating, it seems like a double standard to demonize women for the same kind of natural advantages that we appreciate in men. And to simplify the entire debate down to a single, albeit important, hormone, ignores a great deal of biology and sociology, says Holt. We should celebrate those biological differences. So there's one thing that there is only one counter argument to this, and this is not to say that I buy into that counter argument, but that is the counter argument that will be thrown at people. Preventing women with high testosterone levels from competing in women's category is dumb. But the reason we read this was specifically concerning, well, the recent controversy around trans athletics. The problem is for a lot of people, choosing to go through hormone therapy, well, it will be seen as a choice. I use the verb to choose, yeah. It will be seen as a choice. And because of that, there will be people accusing trans athletes of basically switching, basically undergoing therapy, compete better. It's the South Park episode, right, basically. I don't think this fear is warranted. at the moment, honestly. Simply for a very simple reason. At the moment, becoming a trans woman as an athlete is very, very unlikely to give you better outcomes. I feel like you'd have to be delusional to think that you're going to get better outcomes as a trans woman athlete than as a male athlete. Your performance would need to be insanely different, and until now, that's not something that I have observed in doing my research on the subject. Like, once again, in the case of Lia, she performed at the top of her category when she competed as a male, and like the right-wing memes present her to have. Anyways, I want to read this because someone sent me this video to check out. I don't know what it's about, what bias it has, what angle it's going for. But like, this already is false. Ranked 462. I thought it was 490 something. I'll just pull up the. In her first Ivy League championships in February 2018, she had top 8 finishes in the 500-yard freestyle, the 1,000-yard freestyle, and the 1,650-yard freestyle. It's only that was during her freshman year on the men's team. She started transitioning later. Let's check out this video, and maybe then we can like read her entire interview.
I have a teammate who did not make finals today because she was just bumped out of finals, and it's heartbreaking to see someone who went through puberty as a male and has the body.
Okay, I think we know what bias. I think we know what bias this video is gonna have. Say no to males competing as females. Okay, you can actually discuss this and be opposed to trans athletes without being transphobic. This is just plain transphobic. There is no way of like couching it in different terms.
Male be able to absolutely blow away the competition, and you go into it with a mindset that you don't have a chance.
Lia Thomas pulling away over the final 150 meters. Had to work for it. She was pushed over the first 350 meters. Thomas wins the NCAA championship.
What's up, guys? Derek, moreplates.com. Today we're going to be talking about the highly controversial Lia Thomas winning the national championship. She is the first known trans athlete to win an NCAA Division I title in any sport, winning the 500 freestyle at the NCAA Women's Swimming Championships. Yes, so we have a trans athlete competing against women. So this is formerly a biological male who has since decided to transition to female, and they have improved their positioning quite substantially. The fucking difference in ranking is astronomical, dude. So I had this on my to-do list from a while ago when she was smashing records. For example, 22 years old, UPenn swimmer. He used to compete as a man, smashes 2 U.S. women's records in weekend competition, and finishes one race 38 seconds ahead of her nearest rival. Lia Thomas, 22, won the freestyle, 1650 freestyle, left rivals floundering in a 500 freestyle. Last month competed, so she's been getting a fuck ton of hype behind her in bad ways, a lot, to be honest. Like, the majority is not good press. And for obvious reason. This is an individual who previously was ranked 462nd, I believe. Here it is. Biologically, Lia holds an unfair advantage over competition in the women's category, as evidenced by her rankings that have bounced from 462 as a male to number 1 as a female. Yeah, so
when did Lia Thomas rank as 462nd? That's I guess all the articles are going to be like just repeating this at this point. Biologically, Lia holds an unfair advantage over competition, blah blah blah. I don't know. I feel like the information that she performed very well before transitioning should be included in this. I wonder if it's an artifact, for example, of the fact that she, like, NCAA rules allow athletes to change gender categories, but Thomas needed a year of HRT before she'd be eligible to compete against other women in championship events. During 2 meetings with Schnur at her side, she came out to the men's team and then the women's team. Schnur told the women that Thomas would eventually join them. For her junior year, though, she'd compete with men, but it would be on her terms. At the team's first Ivy League meet on November 9th, 2019, Thomas put on a women's suit and swam the 1,000-yard freestyle against the Columbia men. She swam sporadically at meets after that, pulling back as she got used to her body and the slower times she produced. She was ranked 462nd as a male because she was competing. She was already transitioning, and she was competing as a transitioning woman against men. When she competed as a non-transitioning man, she had top 8 finishes. This debunks the whole premise
Lia
of
Thomas
the criticism.
Not that long ago, was competing in the male division, and this isn't a situation of you barely making the cut of the threshold limits for testosterone suppression. But in addition to that, the time frame in which you need to do it, there are new NCAA stipulations in place for what you would need to be able to qualify as a trans athlete who meets, the recommended requearments essentially for
recommended amount of dedicated wham.
And no, it's not genital surgery, believe it or not. This is I guess a joke that was in the subreddit. Genital surgery is medically unnecessary by the international Olympic community. So this was in response to Pennsylvanian transgender college swimmer dominates competition, sets numerous records. So the reason they're saying this as a joke is because the idea is that if you just suppress your testosterone levels enough with medication, that you do not need to remove your male genitalia. So despite the fact that you have the potential to produce male levels of testosterone, as long as you are essentially pseudo castrating yourself with medication, you are equated to a female in performance.
Except once again,
synthetically equated, apparently, according to
we
the
haven't
IOC, that's
seen.
what they believe, and it's obviously highly controversial because if you still have a functioning motherfucking ball sack, obviously there's a lot of potential for fuckery there, especially when you have medications that are in and out of your system in a very short time frame, which we're going to be getting into shortly.
Okay, as someone with a functioning ball sacks don't magically help you in sports, okay? God damn it.
The actual pharmacology of these medications, because most people do not understand this shit when they talk about it, especially when they get into what is, why it's fair, besides the fact that you have, you're fucking taller, especially in swimming. This is, can you imagine getting, outreached by somebody who used to be a male just a few years ago, simply because they end up fucking taller because of their biological advantage during, not only through puberty do you undergo, increases in bone mineral density, myonuclei accrual through, increases in muscle mass that you would never get as a female with 10x the fucking testosterone exposure. But in addition to that, the lesser amount of estrogen exposure, reducing the rate at which epiphyseal bone closure occurs, you get taller, you have
those are a lot of science words,
you get better leverages, all this shit, especially when you're in this sport that is literally limb relate. It's literally related to how your fucking limbs propel you through water. Do you think that having bigger lungs, a bigger heart, longer fucking arms and legs, longer fucking feet might be useful? I don't know. Does your foot get smaller when you become a, transition? I don't think your foot shrinks, bro. So anyways, obviously it is, it's a highly controversial one. Ben Shapiro posted, all the best women are men today, on Twitter, which obviously, got a lot of retweets and likes and shit. So this
wow,
is,
what a surprise.
Lia
Ben
Thomas
Shapiro is a piece of shit.
The podium. And 2 females.
Did not expect that.
I don't know, kind of disappointed, as you would expect. So anyways, there is a lot to unpack here. I mentioned the ranking going from 462 to number 1. It's a pretty blatant shift in what's going on where you have somebody who is...
Except it's not real. I can't. I genuinely can't. I can't watch this video until the end. If this is the... It's a fucking 15-minute video, too. Maybe there's some more interesting stuff after, but if he's just gonna harp on the rank thing, even though it's inaccurate, then what's the point? I'm just gonna skip ahead.
Unintentionally, because that's just part of being a fucking female, where they lose a bunch of oxygen carrying capacity and performance, whereas you don't. There's so many things overlooked in this conversation that's basic biology driven. So anyway, circling back to the national championship that Lia Thomas just won, here she is. About to smoke the competition and take the title.
That will give her a lot of confidence. Remember, she's just...
I don't know if this would get copyrighted.
So there actually are arguments for his side of the discussion. For example, the fact that she's larger, she has like a larger wingspan. I mean, there are women who have those biological advantages as well without being born male, or assigned male at birth, rather. But anyways.
So I'm just gonna fucking mute it just in case, but here we go, the NCAA championships, as you see here in the comment section. Surprise, surprise. You know, people are not surprised. Congrats.
Hey,
This is the equivalent of a NBA player going to the WNBA, walking ESPN. Comment section about to be a war zone.
Okay, comment section.
With the subscription, but this is the
review. Amazing.
Levels, and has done so for at least 1 year per the regulations. So yeah, the regulations are 10 nanomoles per liter, which is about 288 nanograms per deciliter for 1 year. So that means for 12 months, you have to have the levels equivalent to that of a male or lower than a male. I know, did you mishear me? No, you didn't. You need to have lower levels than 288, the reference range for a...
This is where I was saying biased opinions come in. Yeah. Reminder, the article we read earlier, some of the elite athletes in domains such as weightlifting have less than 10 nanomoles per liter testosterone, male athletes. Like, just to go back to the whole, testosterone is not the deciding factor in this.
A male is about 250 to 1,000, depending on what lab you're using. But a normal biological female will produce roughly 40 to 50 nanograms per deciliter of total test, have a significantly higher binding protein production and lower free test proportionally than a male as well, have significantly lower DHT, free test levels, and much higher estrogen levels. However, 288, what is this representative of? Well, it's about like 5 times higher, 6, 7 times higher than that of a cisgender female. So despite the fact that this individual says you have to have average levels of a cis female levels, no, you actually don't. The limitation is about
where's
10
your
nanomoles per
source
liter.
on that?
They impose the new stipulations that are being proposed where you need to have 36 months underneath.
Like, and like, once again, even assuming he's correct, does that matter? Is there not variation among cis women in testosterone levels as well, which we just read an extensive article about?
5 nanomoles per liter, that is still only 144. Still pretty fucking high. You're still above polycystic ovarian syndrome territory.
And like, I'm not gung ho about about necessarily having trans athletes compete in their in their like gender category. Maybe there are good arguments for like other more minute categorization or etc. etc. It's just the evidence is there that testosterone isn't enough to judge someone's performance, and there needs to be also a fundamental argument about what do we consider acceptable biological advantage and what we don't consider acceptable biological advantage. It's just very iffy.
Testosterone levels to a point where you could not explain this unless you had like internal gonads, like in your, like intersex essentially. Like this is the kind of thing that doesn't really make sense to me, where you have a 10 nanomole per liter cutoff. You are essentially telling these individuals you can take estrogen therapy to induce feminization, grow breasts and do this and that. But you can maintain your testosterone levels to some extent as long as you're underneath here. You can still have Leydig cell stimulation in your ball sack. You can still have an unfair advantage up to a point where you have 6 to 7 times the androgen levels of a fucking female. Like this is viralizing territory. This is male levels. This is like literally you wouldn't even be clinically eligible for TRT at this point. You're within natural physiologic limits for most men. So I don't get how they justify it whatsoever. But anyways, so she has completed the, satisfied the requirements for 12 months of her entire life. So of the 22 years, you only needed one of those years to be under that cutoff. And the cutoff still makes no fucking sense whatsoever. But anyways, in fact, she has completed 2 years of HRT. Not 1, but 2. So, the height she got, the limb length, the leverages, the fucking, muscle mass, the bone, like it's all gone. It's all fucking gone overnight. Lungs, no longer capable of doing anything that they, grew to in the last, the first 20 years, of course. So anyways, though Lia has the support of her coach.
Yeah, this is just not the right discourse to... It looks like the right discourse because of the whole... If you genuinely do believe that testosterone is like the be-all, end-all for performance, then this actually kind of looks like appropriate discourse, but it just isn't. This just isn't the right discourse for the topic.
And many of her teammates, she has received immense hatred and backlash from the media and world at large. Yeah, I would imagine so. She was ranked, 462nd as a male, and then transitioned. I don't know, why not just compete against males? Why don't you just keep competing against males when you transition? Like, do you think you're going to do worse somehow? So now you have to enter the female arena? Like, I don't know. It's pretty obvious, I think, what's going on. In most cases.
You are going to compete.
This is just my speculation that an individual...
Worse. That is literally why she was 464th. Like, once again, she actually did compete against males during her transition, and that is why her results were so bad, even though she was top 8 before transitioning.
It's It's just very problematic, and you would think in your head you would rationalize that maybe this isn't fair to those individuals.
You would think someone who's going to make a 50-minute video on the subject is at least going to like check out her interview, like her perspective, where that information about her actually performing adequately is. But no, you know, just gotta it's more important to spend time reading Instagram comments than actually reading the interview of the person concerned by your video essay. That makes a lot of sense.
Maybe, you know, if I don't want to compete against males because I was a biological male for like fucking 95% of my life, then maybe I should just not compete at all, or see if there's going to be a transitioned division of some sort, which if there's not one,
yep,
in the NCAA, well, that's like tough shit, I guess. I don't know. Like, to me, it seems like a rational, logical, and like ethical fucking decision-making process to not strip away the chance for biological females who don't have this inherent advantage that you had for like building up for 20 years and stripping their chance of, you know, getting a gold or something. Like, it's, I don't know. Anyways, Lia's an excellent swimmer. No one's doubting that. Many accusations insinuate her success in the pool is because she was assigned male at birth. Some even claim that she's taking what other girls have worked their entire lives for. That's literally what I just fucking said. This dismisses several truths. Leah,
oh, she can't point that out. Doesn't fit the narrative. Yeah.
As a male. Like, presumably, if you're even a fucking NCAA athlete swimmer, like, you're pretty fucking
once
good.
again, I have no skin in the game. I'm not a trans athlete. At the end of the day, I'm not an athlete at all. The only skin I have in the game is when people are making those like bad arguments. That's the only skin I have in the game. Bad discourse.
To be, even if you're 462nd, like in the country, presumably, in all of, you know, college athletics, you are 462nd. Yeah, you're not close to one, but of 462 of the top fucking athletes, you're 462. Like, obviously, Lia was good before as a male. Like, no one's doubting that. Well, some people, I guess, are, but that I would, you know, agree with the statement. She has worked her whole life to be good at swimming. Yes, no shit. She's began swimming at just 5 years old. Put thousands of hours into this. Of course, it's like when people say, "Oh, you take steroids, you'll be Mr. If I took steroids, I'd be Mr. Olympia." Like, no, you wouldn't. You fucking idiot. You would not even get close. Leah's not a great athlete because she was AMAB. Leah's a great athlete because she is a great athlete, has worked hard for 17 years to be great at something she loves. I agree. The belief that all AMAB folks are better at, I don't even know what this is, to be honest, that's why I'm just fucking saying the acronym. Better at sports is rooted in the sexist belief that boys are by default better at sports than girls, which is false. Yeah, so, I don't know, let's take, you know, the top female athletes of any sport and pit them against the top male athlete of the same sport. I don't know, I guess put in the comment section who you think would win. Like, let's have Serena Williams versus, like, fucking Djokovic. Like, who wins? You know, I'm pretty sure she herself said she would get smoked. I'm not saying it. She's fucking saying it. I don't know. It just seems to me like no one is saying you can't be a good athlete as a female. No one is saying.
And once again, that just depends on the sport.
The top sprinter in the world who's female, like, she's gonna shit on like 99.9%.
There are sports where
ultimately at the highest level of competition,
where the women will
at the highest level of competition
tend to outperform the men
imposed on them from all aspects. You know, it's a fair playing field. Whereas males, same thing. But then you have an individual who has sort of blurred the lines a bit, and it gets a bit more problematic where it has nothing to fucking do with this, in my opinion. Anyways, elite sports depend on biodiversity. Those who defy white, cis, heteronormative standards are often accused of being unfair. Let's look at an example. Michael Phelps, winningest Olympian of all time. Several biologic features that provide unique advantages in swimming. Torso is abnormally long, his legs short. Wingspan 4 inches longer than his height. Lung capacity is twice the average, and his body produces half the levels of lactic acid the average athlete does. When tested, Phelps was praised as genetically superior, but when women athletes, especially women of color and or trans women, exhibit biological diversity, it's called unfair. So this is a very interesting kind of like tangent, and it's what we talked about with the Caster Semenya debacle and the individuals who are
Why is he calling it a tangent? Okay, how he's gonna frame this? I'm worried. I'm worried about that choice of words. Also, I need to put down some meadows. Well, let's do this.
Biologically female, you know, from birth, but otherwise have like intersex characteristics. And that is a bit more of a debatable discussion in my opinion. But when you have somebody who is blatantly male with blatantly normal physiologic function and is not some sort of situation that is having a, I don't know, like pseudo-hermaphroditism or something.
Okay, that's where the transphobia comes in. Calling someone who's transitioning blatantly male is just in order to dismiss the whole like genetic differences and advantage argument. I feel like that's innately transphobic.
You have an individual who's legitimately like a healthy functioning, like high performing male, and then they transition. Like, this is not about you were born with some fucking biological differentiation that made you be
Okay, I guess Leah's Schrodinger's athlete. She's both high performing, high functioning, and yet she chose to transition in order to be competitive because she allegedly couldn't be competitive in the male category, which once again we've seen is not true. But yeah, so like we're dealing with Schrodinger's athlete here. Amazing.
Elite of your the identified gender that you are. Rather, it is you are identified as male, and then you fucking transition. Like it's a little bit different, in my opinion. Biological differences can provide advantages, but it does not mean they are unfair or grounds for disqualification. Okay, I think we are getting to the point. Like I don't see any sort of like scientific dismantling here, or discussion of the pharmacology used, or the actual hormone levels.
I mean, you dismissed some of the more interesting points with disingenuous arguments. What am I picking here? Edge of Impossible or Counterattack? I like Edge of Impossible. Skeleton level, summon quality, evasion. I'll go with some extra skeleton level.
Question, like they don't even seem to understand what the difference between what estrogen therapy, estrogen supplementation, and testosterone suppressants. Like, do you even know what she's fucking using and how it interacts with the body and how it can be leveraged to be at a more disproportionately advantaged position aside from all of the morphologic changes that she experienced as a teenage boy going through puberty? So anyways, let's get into her explanation of the whole thing. After we hear Caitlyn Jenner chime in, because she always has pretty good stances, I think, on the whole situation. And
oh yeah, Caitlyn Jenner has really good stances on situations. That's a new one.
Very, very relevant if you know her history as I believe she was an Olympic champion decades ago in the Olympics, like a fucking top tier athlete who then transitioned. So if anyone has a relevant opinion, like it's pretty interesting to hear her weigh in on this. And this is what she has to say.
Lia Thomas grew up as a biological boy. A couple of years ago was on the male swim team. A couple of years of hormones and testosterone.
Note she calls her a boy, a biological boy. Gotta throw in a bit of that, like, I don't want to say ageism, but condescension, Hey, she's a boy. Not a man, a boy.
Presence doesn't change a lot of things.
Yeah, it's on 1.25 times speed, by the way, if you're wondering why she's talking so fucking fast.
Hands are big, cardiovascular system big. You see pictures, her back is huge. She can run. I mean, she can swim really fast, and it's just not fair.
Just not fair. Okay. Now let's hear Lia Thomas feeling the effects of testosterone blockers in the pool. This is an interview she did a couple months ago, or a few months ago at this point, and she gives her discussion of the actual medication she uses to shut down her testosterone levels and what happens as a result of that in her performance.
Can you tell me about how the effects you felt in the pool from that, and what training was like, through 19, through 20, and even now, and especially if you're still in hormone therapy or testosterone reduction currently?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I continue to take estrogen and spironolactone, the testosterone blocker, as part of a daily medicine routine to, continue with transitioning, as it's an ongoing process that doesn't have, there's no clear endpoint of a medical transition. And so I continue to take those, and it's been a very interesting experience.
Okay, so before getting into the effects it had on her performance and whatnot, spironolactone, also known as aldactone, this is a diuretic as well as a mild anti-androgen. It is steroidal in nature. It occupies androgen receptors and provides antagonism and some minor inhibition of steroidogenesis, meaning it will have some anti-gonadotrophic activity and prevent the production of LH and FSH. In addition to that, exogenous estradiol. So using oral micronized estradiol is the preferred modality.
You ready?
Administering
how are you feeling better?
Therapy at this point in males transitioning to females, as well as the concurrent usage of an anti-androgen, which is oftentimes cyperterone acetate, but in the US it is not approved for that purpose, so they defer to spironolactone, which I think is a pretty shitty anti-androgen in my opinion. Reason being is you can literally, they've used it in hirsutism attenuation. Hirsutism is like excessive, body hair growth, androgenic, viralizing features in women. So a female who is getting, like mustache growth or hair loss, stuff like this could be, hirsutism, which is in general induced by overly
hirsutism. I thought he was saying horsetism. Oh my god. Okay, I'm interrupting this mind-boggling content to fight Chinchilla.
But yeah, I'm gonna go. So thank you very much for everything, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Did you see Destiny reacting to cat juicing? No, I was busy when you linked me that.
That's usually, I usually try to have dates as close as possible to my house so I can go to bed very quickly. So that would be the utility of that type of thing. Like, yeah, come over, you seem fine, but I just want to drink juice. Do you want to have juice at my house? I have a lot of juice. Like, yeah, I don't.
That's
really,
so cute.
I just don't like any of these different types of weird, like, discourses, because I think all of it's just, like, I think everybody thinks that, like, if they've seen, like, Roofed V and, like, Richard Lauriana, like, enough times that they all think that they're, like, a pickup artist. that's usually I usually try to have dates as close as possible to my house so I can.
I think that's super cute. Look, I love juice. Okay, I've been drinking juice. I have bad respect for Kat. Okay, I actually, you know what? I'm gonna tweet this out at Kat. I think I'll keep the tab open. Juice is often too sugary. It is, yeah, but I'm okay. All right, let's go back to this fucking video. This video has been making me mad, dude. Until now, every single thing he's brought up, we've debunked. He's brought up the fact that when she competed as a male in the NCAA, or rather, she didn't actually compete as a male. If he'd actually read her interview, which is the first link I posted, she was already transitioning, but she where was it? Yeah. For her junior year, though, she would compete with men, but it would be on her terms. At the team's first Ivy League meet on November 9th, 2019, Thomas put on a women's suit and swam the 1,000-yard freestyle against the Columbia men. She swam sporadically at meets after that, pulling back as she got used to her body and the slower times she produced. Why am I bringing this up? Because this is like the main conservative talking point when it comes to when it comes to this. This idea that she was ranked 468th or 4th, something like that, 460th when competing with men, but then ranked first when competing with women is false. She was already undergoing treatment and still competing against men when she was ranked 460th. Before her treatment in 2018, she was consistently in the top 8 in every single category at the collegiate level. As a male swimmer. She was a top-level male swimmer without the hormone treatment. And no one's fucking talking about that, and pisses me off. Anyways.
Like if you have polycystic ovarian syndrome, you have higher than normal testosterone levels or free test levels, and you have hirsutism, you're going to have, potentially hoarseness of the voice too. You might have, the facial hair growth, body hair growth, all these kind of like standard masculinizing characteristics that you.
So here he's talking about specific hormone treatments.
Like anti-androgens to suppress that activity. Something interesting is the fact that finasteride, a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor that is literally prescribed to men widespread for hair loss prevention, is as effective for attenuating hirsutism in females as the anti-androgen spironolactone. So the anti-androgen
I used to try finasteride.
Using is I literally have as much androgenicity reduction I have more androgenicity reduction from my dutasteride use for hair loss prevention than Lia Thomas has from spironolactone for androgen receptor antagonism. Like, it's not a very potent anti-androgen. It's actually probably more useful as a diuretic. And to be honest, I think its utility in pharmacology as an anti-androgen, I think it's poor, to be honest. I think there are more progressive anti-androgens that would be more effective, to be honest. But anyways, that's kind of, just an explanation of what it is. But then the estrogen therapy too, obviously concurrently administering exogenous estradiol, you're going to have significant negative feedback to your HPTA, which would then tell your brain, your hypothalamus would register, oh, I have sufficient estradiol levels, so I don't need to produce gonadotropin releasing hormones. So no more GnRH is getting shot down to the pituitary, which is less LH and FSH production being shot down to your gonads, which means less testosterone production in your testicles. So you have this 1-2 punch of anti-androgenic activity as well as estrogen therapy to not only reduce masculinization, the maintenance of masculine features with the androgen reduction, antagonism at the receptor, as well as some minor steroidogenesis inhibition. But in addition to that, the negative feedback by estrogen and the feminization of estrogen. We see males develop, bitch tits all the time, even on shit tons of testosterone.
That's a weird way of saying it.
Activity in your body doesn't mean you're void of estrogenicity. So with this individual, we have a big hit of estrogen, seemingly on a daily basis, or some level of estrogen that puts them into physiologic ranges, presumably to induce feminizing feature progression, growing breasts and whatnot. But the anti-androgenic activity, how significant is it? We're going to see shortly, where we get into the pharmacology of this stuff first. So spironolactone, pharmacokinetics of estradiol, pharmacokinetics of sublingual estradiol, pharmacokinetics of spironolactone. These are drugs that have reasonably short half-lives. The actual stipulations of when you show up and get your testosterone tested and you have to be suppressed below this 10 nanomole per liter cutoff is actually pretty fucking loose. It is not something that seemingly is tested hardcore into competition. It's something that within 28 days, no earlier than 28 days, should you be registering as these testosterone level, exceeding these testosterone levels. You need to be tested within 28 days and have tested underneath the cutoff. But again, the cutoff, absurdly high to begin with. Above and beyond that, if you were tested within 28 days, let's just say you're tested 2 weeks out. It's like, oh, you're obviously following protocol. You're obviously on your therapy. How quick are these drugs in and out of your system? It's pretty fucking quick. So let's get into the spironolactone Pharmacokinetic profile. So we have levels of spironolactone after oral administration.
I don't really know how to
100
address
milligram.
all this like science stuff he's talking about, because the very basic premise of his argument, which is that testosterone is the like be all end all of performance, is already debunked in in like our discourse. So I don't understand. I just got here with this topic. What's my point of view? I'm still forming it. If you'd asked me a day ago, I would have been like, yeah, the thing is, testosterone is actually like a performance enhancing drug, etc., etc. It's much more complicated than that. Doing research on it has opened my eyes to the fact that we actually don't yet understand all of the mechanisms underlying sexual dimorphism between in athletic performance. We don't understand the mechanisms, and saying gatekeeping based on testosterone levels doesn't seem to make proper scientific sense. It makes some sense. It doesn't come out of nowhere. Testosterone does affect certain very key parts of our metabolism, but there are plenty of counterexamples and counterfactuals that completely debunk the narrative. So the article I linked here brings some of the more interesting paradoxes that it points out. I would say are testosterone levels in let me scroll down to the right part. Oh yeah, you cannot predict their performance, men's performance based on their testosterone levels. The same goes for women. And you can get some clues by looking at women with androgen receptor mutations. So women who don't react to testosterone, whose receptors for the androgen hormones don't react to testosterone. So even though those women have higher testosterone levels, the testosterone cannot affect their metabolism directly, or if at all, in like a severe case of the mutation. And yet, those women are extremely overrepresented among elite athletes, meaning there has to be something else in their biology or their genetics that predisposes them for better performance that is not the testosterone, since the testosterone has much less of an effect on their body, if at all, than among people who don't have the androgen receptor mutation. So, for example, the researcher working on this, Holt, suggests part of it might be growth hormone, basically trying to account for the Y chromosome there. There are other issues with the testosterone narrative or hypothesis. One study of professional male triathletes found no relationship between testosterone levels and performance. Another, looking at professional cyclists, found the same lack of correlation. Yet another, comparing cyclists, weightlifters, and controls to each other on a cycling test, found a negative correlation between testosterone levels and performance. A study of teenage weightlifters found no relationship between boys' testosterone levels and a negative correlation among the girls. Some studies have even found mixed or opposing results within their own findings. One found that sprinters seemed to get an advantage from testosterone, while other runners did not. Another came to the conclusion that it helped female track athletes, but not male ones. Basically, from a scientific methodology perspective, when you look at like many contradictory studies, either you go into detail, and maybe there's some problems with methodology, etc., but my naive interpretation of this is that we have not been able to isolate testosterone as a variable, meaning, or put in other words, there are other variables that supersede the influence testosterone has. Meaning, testosterone is not the most important variable in the difference between athletic performance between men and women. Yeah, biology seems super complicated, and reducing things down to single variables often doesn't seem to work. But similarly, maleness doesn't just simply reduce down to testosterone only, does it? Well, the problem is sports organizations have been reducing it to that. So, a final argument against testosterone. One analysis found that 25% of elite male athletes have testosterone levels below what the International Association of Athletics Federations consider the lower limit for men. What's more, it wasn't the athletes in less strength or speed-oriented sports. Some of the events with the most men below the limit were powerlifting, rowing, track and field, ice hockey, and rowing. They're rowing twice. What the fuck? Anyways. Yeah. The problem is, female athletes like champion sprinters Caster Semenya and Duty Chand have had to fight in recent years for the right to compete as women because their natural testosterone levels are far higher than the average woman's. Organizations like the International Association of Athletics Federations and the International Olympic Committee have put hard limits on the amount these women are allowed to have in their bloodstream, on the grounds that it enhances their performance in a way that's unfair to their fellow competitors. So this is one problem. The other problem is, the reason I'm covering this is because we're in the middle of basically discourse in the US over trans athletes, because Lia Thomas, a trans woman who transitioned, who started transitioning like 3 years ago, has broken records in her category in swimming. However, and there's this false narrative that's being vehiculated that I believe, because it's like hard to debunk. It's not that hard to debunk. You just have to read her interview. But if all you look at is if you don't dig any deeper, the narrative is you're looking at someone who, when she competed against men, she ranked 460th, and then when she competed against women, she ranked first. So people like this YouTuber are looking at it and are like, whoa, she's basically using gender theory to cheat, to score first, even though she was a mediocre athlete. When the reality is, but the problem is, like, the whole narrative is false. In 2018, before she started hormone therapy, she was top of her category. She scored top 8 in multiple different swimming categories at the collegiate level. At which she was competing. In 2019, when she was ranked 460th, was when she was already undergoing hormone therapy, which is supposed to reduce like her muscle mass and affect her biology in a way that reduces her performance. And her performance has gone down. She's lost like 30 seconds compared to her records. Now, does that mean that she doesn't have an advantage? She probably still has an advantage from having been assigned male at birth. She's very tall for a woman. She has a large wingspan. Obviously, there's women who have that too, but like those seem like they could be advantages for swimming. But yeah. So she had poor performance against men when she was transitioning to a woman, exactly. But she had top of her class performance against men when she was not yet transitioning. When she had a full like male biology, she was a top 8 swimmer with like yeah, she had like top tier finishes. This makes sense because if you look at athletes in sports, there are specific body types that are often universal in each sport. The shape and size of the bodies are a large portion of how you dominate in your sport. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think this article mentions it too, like how gymnasts are small, or like you'll never see a tall gymnast beat equivalently trained smaller gymnasts. They'll have a better sense of balance, a lower center of weight in their body, and they'll be able to perform more complex and more technical and more precise movements. Okay, 990. I can't address your stuff. I don't know what you're talking about. Can you chill, please? Or like stay on topic, okay? We're not talking about military cults, whatever the fuck that is. If you continue paragraph posting, I'm gonna time you out for a little bit, okay? Just chill. But yeah, so like, and then the main problem is comes down to a problem of misunderstanding what it is to be trans. Because the people who are against trans athletes There are like only two arguments. There's either an entirely like transphobic, trans-denying argument of being trans is a choice, so they choose to do something that enhances their relative performance, so they're doping. Because the only thing you're supposed to be able to do is train better. But if you acknowledge that transness is an inherent fact of life for a trans person, okay, I'm cool. All right, no worries. If you acknowledge that transness is if you acknowledge that transness is an inherent thing, then it gets a bit more complicated. Like undergoing hormone therapy is or transitioning still is a choice, but it's not much of a choice. Honestly, you're suffering from, you're probably just suffering from gender dysphoria. I wouldn't perceive it as a choice. So then the last defense there would be of denying trans athletes under some guise of something could be unfair or fair, would be arguing that there could be athletes who pretend to be trans in order to get better performance. Which right now I would say it's concern trolling. The social backlash for being trans, especially a trans athlete, I think would far outweigh the disadvantages, especially if you think of someone moving from the male athlete industry to the female athlete industry or women's athlete industry. The women's athletes earn less. They get less recognition. They get less time on TV. They get less people going to view their events. If you actually are fully career oriented, you would need to be absolutely certain that you're gonna absolutely perform like crazy for it to pay off, because you're probably gonna do better as a maybe slightly less incredible male athlete. Still, that argument will exist, and I don't yet know how to address it. Anyways, I'm rambling because I don't yet have like a strict idea on this. I'm not trans, and I'm not an athlete. I have no stake in this game personally, so I'm just like trying to educate myself, really. I believe there should be open leagues, segregate women and men, but also have an open league. Could also lead to women being paid more if they want to compete in an open league, which could tap into a new market of interest. Depending on the sport, I genuinely think that that would be absolutely valid. So for fighting sports, I think that would probably be a terrible idea. But there are a lot of sports that probably could be mixed and I like or open. That shouldn't pose a problem. I'm a heterosexual, by the way. Am I a bad guy now because I refuse to have my own sexuality be compromised? No one's trying to compromise your sexuality. The only people telling you that your sexuality is under threat are like weirdo alt-right culture war people. But heterosexuality is not under attack. It's just that people are acknowledging other alternatives and giving them, you know, screen time and representation and all those things. But those aren't threats to heterosexuality. Fallon Fox was a woman transgender who beat up some women pretty bad, but it would be a decision to compete, not a requirement. Yeah. Based on body types and overall performances, sports besides team sports like football and rugby should be segregated by height and weight more than sex. Well, the problem with that is that for now, on average, for the same body weight, a woman will be disadvantaged compared to the same body weight in a man, and like similar training. Obviously, those are like statistics, but on average, that is the state of our knowledge as far as the sexual dimorphism goes. So I don't know if that that doesn't necessarily work. One thing I was thinking of before diving deep into the problems with considering testosterone, I was wondering if doing categories by hormone levels could work. But I don't think that would work anymore. height and weight, I don't know if that's enough. I genuinely don't think that's even taking into account height and weight. I don't think it works. I could be wrong though. If you like have a study on it, I would love to see it. And I'm not saying this in like a challenging way. I'm genuinely trying to just educate myself. But yeah, like they do for wrestling and lifting competition. Yeah, my understanding, once again, I could be wrong on this. I haven't like actually delved deep into that aspect of the question, but it is that that like pound per pound, the body mass of a man is going to represent much more strength than the body mass of a woman. And then maybe you can balance for height as well, but you won't be able to compensate for that reality just that way.
Dose, and we can see here in hours. This is not days. This is not weeks.
A woman versus a man has been done across many sports, from tennis to MMA, and the men have dominated. It's not even close. There are sports where the opposite happens. Sports that require fine motor control, like shooting sports, are sports where women can defeat and in fact could be considered biologically predisposed to be better than men. And also extreme endurance, from what I've seen. Extreme endurance, like ultra marathons, are situations where like actual raw strength no longer matters at all, and a woman's biology will actually have an advantage. Other than like those two fields, though, from what I've seen, you're mostly correct. Though there's a final also problematic factor, which is that society has a systemic predisposition for encouraging male athletes. I've already mentioned better pay, better competitive infrastructure. There is a genuine problem, and you see that like in esports or in other sports where there is no biological difference between men and women that should explain difference in performance. It's purely societal, and yet you still see like men e-athletes be much better at the video games they play than the women teams. I don't think it's a biological reason. And so you can have huge differences in performance just because of basic like societal imbalances. So it's hard to really narrow down what's at play here. Though I'm not saying this to deny that there is also a biological reality. It's just you gotta wrap your head around all those different factors, and the fact that it's really hard to isolate them one by one to understand what's going on. Any solution will need to be balanced against the viability of the sport commercially. Otherwise, you just end up destroying the sport. It's an absolute fucking minefield to navigate. Yes, that's a concern I haven't addressed yet. That's absolutely true. If the sport is very niche and has like no one watching it, and can barely sustain a men's and a women's field, you can't start adding more categories. It's just not going to be viable. I understand the natural processes of the hominid body. Procreation and multiplying ourselves is integrated into our very being by our past evolved natures. If one chooses to not to procreate, for, say, an ancient group of people that understood the concept of procreation and turned around and used it to procreate entire armies to self-sustain their empire, shall we persecute them? I'm not sure what you're getting at. There's no studies, unfortunately. Abolish all sports. Nice. There's no studies, unfortunately, not that I know of, but as someone who swam in high school and dove in college, wrestled in high school, and lifted with the weight trainers because that just happened to be the time I could be in the shared space, height and weight seemed far better options over just sex or just testosterone. Okay, interesting. I think there's hand-eye coordination in biology, which would make sense for video games. Naturally would make sense for men to have better hand-eye coordination. I'm not a biologist though, lol, but I'm sure there's literature on this. I have read a study on hand-eye coordination a couple of years ago, and that study tested that study basically hinged on early age activities. And what that study showed was that indeed, men have better hand-eye coordination, but it had nothing to do with biology. It had to do with socialization, because kids are socialized to play with balls, to play games that directly train their hand-eye coordination. and girls are trained to play games that train their girls are trained to play games that train their usually like stereotypically train their like their social and emotional aspects. Like let's go full stereotype. Like the boys will be playing with a ball, so obviously hand-eye coordination training from a very young age. The girls will be playing like with tea, simulating like a dinner. And what do you end up with? You end up with women who are much better at communicating and understanding their emotions and understanding other people's emotions and conversations, and men who are much better at hand-eye coordination. It's not rocket science. Like if you do something from a very young age, you're going to be much better at it. And that study showed that when girls had more of a gender neutral youth, with more like sports and balls and stuff, they had good hand-eye coordination. Testosterone levels actually have a huge influence on athletes' performances. It's much more nuanced than that, sirop sans codeine. So exogenous testosterone, for example, is a doping drug. There's no denying that. But endogenous testosterone, the one that's already produced by our body, it's not a clear factor for determining an athlete's performance. I'll link you an article here that cites various studies, and you can let me know if you see any issues with it. But basically, when it comes to endogenous testosterone, you have, for example, we just went over it, so I'll go over it very fast. But for example, one analysis found that 25% of elite male athletes have testosterone levels below what the International Association of Athletics Federations considered the lower limit for men. What's more, it wasn't the athletes in less strength or speed-oriented sports. Some of the events with the most men below the limit were powerlifting, rowing, track and field, ice hockey. Here's a series of studies where testosterone levels and performance were either had no relationship or or studies were contradictory or even negative correlation between testosterone levels and performance. It is surprising. Like if you asked me yesterday, I would have 100% agreed with you. But since then I've read this article and I changed my mind. I'm open to change my mind if there's like better science. This is from 2019, so maybe there's better science. Now, none of this means that testosterone is not a factor in the biology, but it does seem to point out that testosterone is a smaller factor than other things that would be much more important. At least that's the only way I find I can interpret those studies. Honestly, it seems like a complicated subject, and the research seems like there's work to be done on the topic for now. Anyways, oh man, this video. Yeah, let's see if we can continue the video.
This is not months. This is nanogram per milliliter levels of spironolactone. Here we go. We have one single oral dose, and we hit peak concentrations within 1 hour. Now look at this. Look how quick the drop-off is. So you can imagine how quick in and out of the system this stuff can be.
A quick in and out.
Break down the half-life. It is 1.4 hours of spironolactone. However, there are metabolites that linger in the system, like 7-alpha thiomethyl spironolactone, as well as 6-beta hydroxy 7-alpha thiomethyl spironolactone, as well as canrenone. And these things last in the body much longer, which have this lingering gonadatropic activity, anti-androgen activity for longer spans of time. So the overall breakdown of this compound is it's still in and out of your system within 24 hours.
There are also other hormones that dictate how much glucose is given to your muscles. If you notice the difference between bodybuilders 40 years ago to now, because they have figured this out and use other hormones to get absolutely massive. Yeah, it's like really fucking complicated. There's a lot of factors at play, and it's not just hormones. Like the article I linked earlier, one of the researchers speculates that human growth hormone might be one of the bigger factors, which technically is a hormone too, but yeah. More plates, more dates. I love this channel. This is my first time watching a video of his, and I'm actually like pissed off. Not so much with the testosterone thing, because that's a very common. That's like a very common thing. Once again, like 24 hours ago, I would have said the same stuff. So like I can't be mad at that. The one thing I am mad at is that because I imagine you know what we're talking about. We're talking about Lia Thomas's performance in where am I at 36 minutes. We're talking about Lia Thomas's performance in the NCAA. This guy, where is it? Where does he quote her? Anyway, this guy rails on her. This guy rails on her ranking 460th in 2019 when she competed against men, and now ranking first when she's competing against women. The problem is when people are throwing that data around. In 2019, she was already undergoing transition. In fact, in 2018, she was already competing. And this time, in 2018, she was competing as a fully biological male without hormone treatment, and she was consistently. She had in every single competition, she was in the top 8. In every single competition. And then people are citing the fact that during her transition, she had worse performance competing against men as a proof that she transitioned in order to perform better against women, even though she was a top 8 swimmer in the men's category. And this guy is repeating that fallacy, which actually pisses me off. It pisses me off because it's very easy to debunk. Like he's doing a 50-minute video, and he isn't arsed to read her fucking interview where she mentions her results in 2000, where she talks about her results in 2019, and where she also talks earlier about her results in 2018. It's like, yeah, you're getting into you're going into weird area 990. Yeah. I remember Johnny Candido had a video on trans athletes and powerlifting. I'm kind of curious what he said. Yeah, we can go check that out.
Out of your system, all of a sudden your brain's like, holy shit, need to produce sperm, need to make testosterone. We need to get shit going because we do not have
sperm
enough production to adequately meet androgen receptor activation needs or enough estrogen. Because again, estrogen also in and out of your system pretty fast here too. So we have the pharmacokinetics of oral estradiol. So
I fucked up.
Sublingual versus oral administration. They are slightly different. However, and you can manipulate the pharmacokinetic profile
to
a degree where you have a higher spike in serum concentrations with sublingual than oral. But at the end of the day, the actual suppression of gonadotropins is relatively similar across. I believe that FSH levels are less suppressed on oral than on sublingual. So, but in general, most people are going to be just popping a pill. So you end up with a graph looking like this. You have a 2 milligram oral dose, 4 milligram oral dose, 8 milligram oral dose, and we have a spike in picogram per milliliter concentrations up to, this is about physiologic limits in men. These
Who is this guy? Is he anti or pro trans women in sports generally? He seems to be pretty much anti.
The menstrual cycle, obviously. So this is time of menstrual cycle relative to mid-cycle luteinizing hormone peaks. We have levels as far down as
seems to be anti
male levels essentially, and then spiking up into like, you know, almost 300 picograms per milliliter.
Not to use this to determine one way or the other, but does this person have credentials or a wiki reader? They seem to be someone who is really big into sports and lifting and how to become more fit. They seem to be a fitfluencer, if you don't mind me coining that term. All things self-improvement related. More plates, more dates. There you go. Yeah, I was gonna say he seems to be one of those that really that reload. I saw his banner, that's all I need to know about him. Oops. No worries. I forgot to delete before pressing enter. Yeah, that happens to me too. It's 15 minutes, not an hour like that guy. Okay, cool. Yeah, he's going really deep into some like weirdo graphs. But I'm listening with one ear. There might be something interesting here. But the problem is that I'm already not buying into the I'm already not buying into the original premise, which is that the testosterone level is like the be all end all of performance. So I don't know why I'm listening to this. He just seems to be leaning way too much into science aspects rather than accepted conclusions, which worries me. Yeah, people doing their own science when they aren't qualified to do it is usually pretty scary. Trying really hard to look like a main with that banner and weak facial hair. Hey, please, let's not talk about weak facial hair, okay? I'll feel self-conscious.
Per milliliter, some on the upper limit of the 95 percentile range, or upwards of fucking 700 plus. But in general, we're following this kind of a structure for estradiol production in women. So again, when you go back to the pharmacokinetics of actual oral estradiol, this is what Lia Thomas is administering. She's using oral estradiol, presumably because that is the go-to therapy, with concurrent spironolactone in the USA. And you have picogram per milliliter levels somewhat equating to, I would speculate, this or closer to this. Now again, look how fast it's in and out of your system. And how much suppression do you really get out of that to begin with, compared to if you were, I don't know, had your actual gonads removed. I'm not suggesting that you do that. I'm just saying at the end of the day, this is not necessarily something that is providing some permanent level of castration like is otherwise implied. They think this therapy is, oh, you manually maintain these levels all the time and you can't manipulate the system whatsoever. It's like, how frequently are you fucking testing for this shit to begin with? And how suppressive is it really? So here we have
So like all this is a fair point if we go off the premise that the hormone levels are the most important determining factor in whether it's doping or not. Which once again, I'm not buying that. I'm not buying the whole hormone level theory thing.
Transgender women were treated with estrogens. 14 were given sublingual micronized 17 beta estradiol 2 milligrams twice per day. So you can, again, like I mentioned,
all right, with some nuance, like hormones do obviously matter. It's just I really don't understand them as the be all end all of this. There are many other factors that
sublingual, if you want to avoid some level of
are not being taken into account properly.
More like liver, and get a more disproportionate spike in estradiol concentrations relative to estrone, because the liver does produce conjugates quite significantly. But anyways, one subject was given 100 micrograms via transdermal patch, one given estradiol valerate injection. All but one trans woman who wished to retain erectile function were administered spironolactone. All were on 50 milligrams twice daily dosing. 10 out of 15 had doses increased to 100 milligrams twice daily at the 3-month mark. So when you look at the spironolactone administrations, we had one trans woman with elevated free and total test at 6 months, did not take spiro because they wanted to retain erectile function. We see the median testosterone and estrogen levels changing with therapy. So we have estradiol levels starting at 29.
Is this cherry picking or am I mistaken? Well, it depends how. The problem with calling it cherry picking or not is that we would need to go for like this is one study, so arguably it could be cherry picking, but unless we have a clear idea of what most studies say on this, we don't know. It could be the study is representative of the consensus in the scientific community, or it could not be. The only way to know would be to consult a meta-analysis instead of just reading one study. That being said, considering he doesn't seem to be like actually trained in the ways of science, I wouldn't expect. I'm a bit skeptical of this guy. Like, you know, not cherry picking. So I guess you seem to be focusing on the aspect of the argument that people would willfully transition for an advantage, but you have to also consider whether the impact to a sport could happen as a byproduct. Right now, it seems like you either impact females or you impact trans women by exclusion. Where's the solution? Well, the problem also is, are women actually impacted as much by by competing with trans women? Or I'm sorry, are cis women impacted as are cis women impacted by actually impacted by competing with trans women? I feel like depending on the sport, it could be true or could not be true. And this specific case, and depending on how the transition is dealt with, etc., etc., it seems like a lot of the devil is in the details. But the problem is the scientific consensus doesn't seem strong enough to like even agree on what the details should be. Anyways, what I was gonna say, I think if I don't know, in this specific case of Lia Thomas, for example, I think it's clear that she was going to dominate in a similar way, whether she stayed in the men's category or after transitioning. So it is very, very hard to buy into this idea that her participating in the women's category is not at the detriment of the other women. I think you have to accept that they will be, unless there's a hard nuance there. So there's going to be a loser either way, and it doesn't make me feel comfortable impacting either party. Possibly, but in this case, it really doesn't seem like that's what's happening. Like, Lia Thomas was already dominating the field as a male athlete. Or maybe not dominating, but at the top of the field. Caster Semenya comes to mind as a cis woman who was excluded because of the ignorant rules put into place to exclude trans women. Yes. Yeah, that's what this article is about testosterone. It starts off talking mostly about Semenya and the issues with those rules, yeah. It doesn't really make sense. Lia Thomas is #1 ranked in the entire country. What you mean? She was consistently in the top 8 as a male athlete in the competitions she was participating in at the collegiate level, which is still what she's doing. She's competing at like college level. The only thing I'm fighting back against here is this narrative. People are citing her her performance in 2019 as number 460th, while she was already transitioning, already under the influence of hormones, and competing with other men. No, she was not. First off, she was not ranked 426. She was ranked 460 something, and she was not ranked 460th as male. She was already transitioning. If you actually bothered to read her interview, you would see, hey, at the team's first Ivy League meet on November 9th, 2019, for her junior year, though, she would compete with men, but it would be on her terms. At the team's first Ivy League meet on November 9th, 2019, Thomas put on a women's suit and swam the 1,000-yard freestyle against the Columbia men. She swam sporadically at meets after that, pulling back as she got used to her body and the slower times she produced. She was already transitioning. And she had to compete with men, because you have to wait a year. NCAA rules allow athletes to change gender categories, but Thomas needed a year of hormone treatment before she would be eligible to compete against other women in championship events. So she, being an athlete, she wanted to continue competing. She had to continue competing. Still not seeing evidence of her being number 466 during transition. She would be eligible to compete against other women. She had to continue competing against men. For her junior year, as she was started transitioning, she'd compete with men as because as she got used to her body and the slower times she produced. The slower times were because she was under hormone treatment. And that is why the people cite her classification in 2019. People cite her classification in 2019 as like a catch when she was already transitioning. In fact, in her first Ivy League championships in February 2018, she had top 8 finishes in the 500-yard freestyle, the 1,000-yard freestyle, and the 1,650-yard freestyle. And you seem incapable of having a reasonable discussion, Gonzo, calling me a dumb bitch. Like, you're not even listening to what I'm saying. In her first Ivy League championships in 2018, before she started transitioning, she was a top 8 contender. She was a top 8 contender, and you're pretending that she ranked 466th. Because what? You're uncomfortable with looking at the truth? Looking at the truth that she was actually a very successful male athlete, and then oh, you're lame. But hey, keep insulting people on the internet. If it's the only way you can feel better, it's okay. We all know your kind. Owned L, fat, you fell off, plus your white name. True. I'll try to do better enough.
Picograms per deciliter and going all the way up to 258. Now, total test levels, nanograms per deciliter, 405 baseline, going down to 42. That is within physiologic female limits. So you can understand how, if indeed Lia Thomas is taking this on a daily basis
Bet you're
at
poor
an adequate
too.
dose, you could indeed reduce testosterone levels to a point where it is representative of natural female levels. However,
being poor is cool.
This effect is going to be transient based upon if she's taking her medications on a daily basis. Is there somebody literally like a hawk looking at her take her shit?
Literally an account from today.
Whenever she fucking pleases, essentially, pull it out of her system, get clearance, and then have all of that negative feedback inhibition and anti-androgenic activity totally abated and be able to spike LH production to her ball sack and pulse out as much as she wants until she knows she's going to be tested again and then induces, her therapy again. And that's even like at the highest level of fuckery, whereby
basically what he's talking about is he's accusing trans athletes of being able to he's accusing trans athletes of being able to control their testosterone level to optimize performance for events. Which definitely is something that would have to be looked into, then we run into the problem of what's like exogenous and endogenous testosterone, but it would be very similar to doping at that point. So I understand that concern. It's just we know exogenous testosterone is doping, and we know endogenous testosterone isn't necessarily doping. So what the biology is going to be for a trans woman is probably going to be complex, actually. Honestly, the new Twitch automated suspicious bullshit is pretty based. Yeah, looks pretty efficient.
Looking all of the anatomical advantages, like all of the organs that have developed over years of androgen exposure, the fucking limbs, the fucking oxygen carrying capacity, again, like I mentioned, can be limited by this androgen depression or suppression, but ultimately, again, lung size, heart size, muscle size is not permanently destroyed. You have myonuclei accrual. You are also going to be retaining some level of muscle mass that you built up over years of training as a male, and bone mineral density and size and length and fucking leverages that you otherwise would just never have gotten if you were a biological female for the entirety of the first 20 years of your life. So again, going back to, do you have transiently on paper equated levels when you're tested? Yeah, you do, but there is significant fuckery potential with hormone manipulation, because at the end of the day, you only have to show up on the day of the test with your hormone levels under 288. So again, even if she was trying to,
what Nep just said is true. Like, shaming people for their wealth is not okay. And so me using that insult is weird. I like Nep is what he said is exactly correct. I just wanted to do an own based on the like thing of owning, but I couldn't come up with a good idea.
Like aggressive feminization possible, then yeah, you would probably do your daily administrations with a max dose to achieve these 42 nanogram per deciliter levels. But again, if you're competing against females and you were just a male a couple of years ago and you're trying to fucking win, like what is the likelihood that you're not going to take advantage of your max cutoff too? You know, you're within the limits, so as long as you maintain under 288, you're good, right? So what is to stop her from, even if you could achieve this level with...
I'm so confused. Oh, I'm talking to the... There's like people in the other chat. Don't worry about them, okay? They if you close your eyes, they don't exist. Please don't shame me for being Mr. Moneybags. It's not my fault. I'm the face of Monopoly. Mr. Moneybags. They should be worried about me.
The max dose that
then go and come tell them yourself.
That, you know, maybe your prescription is less than that. Maybe you actually only want to stay within. I'm just told that this is the number that is fair. I've been told it's fair, so I'll just, you know, stick to the fair number. And no one can tell you otherwise, because this is the stipulation that these are the rules and you're just following the fucking rules. It's not your fault, right? So again, it's like, it's kind of a weird like ethical boundary between, you know, how much does she want to get an advantage over the competition versus like how aggressively does she want to feminize herself and induce anti-androgenic activity? Because again, you saw even in the trial here, you have individuals who like one.
So this is where like the fundamentally transphobic stuff comes back. This idea that, oh fuck. Oh, never mind. It keeps coming back to this idea that like that's flabbergasting to me, that like there's not going to be proper that those people basically aren't actually trans, that they are going to try, like, do you this guy has to not understand what being trans means if he's talking about like reducing your feminine characteristics in order to have better performance. Maybe a trans person is going to contradict me. I'm not an expert on the subject, but my understanding is that, especially if you have any kind of body dysmorphia, the last thing you want to do is sacrifice your body's characteristics and feel less at home in your body. In fact, that's why you go through the fucking hormone treatment in the first place. So it's insane and honestly ignorant to argue from this position, unless you're assuming that there are like bad faith trans people pretending to be trans and whatnot. But like I'm being way too I feel like that is way too how to put it, way too lenient on those people.
Person want to maintain erectile function, so they, you know, they did not use the spironolactone dose, you know? So again, if you're using spironolactone and estradiol on a daily basis, does it mean that you cannot achieve these levels? Like, sure, at some dose, this stuff is only as a dose-dependent effect in some capacity, whereby at some point you'll achieve like close to near like gonadotropin suppression, have your test levels crushed into the gutter at 42 nanograms per deciliter. But there is an in-between whereby we just know she's on therapy. We don't know to what degree. We don't know if her test levels are fucking 200 or 50, especially at the time of test, you know? As long as she's under that cutoff at that time and your cutoff limit is still that of a male, it just makes no sense to me. So anyways, she says here how her performance...
And like males have have world-shattering performance with lower levels than that. It's...
performance was affected negatively.
Swimming and training while taking HRT, as I've experienced a lot of muscle loss and strength loss, and you know, getting back in the water at the beginning of the year, and just struggling to be anywhere close to where I was previously is very interesting. And so I have to like readjust my goals and what I think of as a good time or a good pace to hold in practice as times and paces I held in practice and in meets before.
Hey, Epic Star.
I'm
How are you doing?
often nowhere close to.
Yeah, but still, it's like you were the 462nd ranked male, and now you're the top female, even with these suppressed markers of performance. Like, what does that say for this whole thing, you know?
I was gonna, he was not... Wait, what? She. Did this guy just misgender her?
The meets before, I'm often nowhere close to.
Yeah, but still, it's like you were the 462nd ranked male, and now you're the top female, even with these suppressed markers of performance. Like, what does that say for this whole thing, you know? So, like, there's a lot of...
Okay, sorry. He was using the, like, gender neutral they. Brain, ignorant shit may be incoming. Yeah, but at this point, I have no idea what any of it means. Because if you say, yeah, but dysphoria and trans women wanting to be feminine, then you get slammed as true scum. From my understanding, wanting to feminize yourself should be optional then. Yeah, it should. Yeah, you're right to point out that there is debate over that as well. And there is contention over that. And it's I don't know, it's a complicated topic. And I don't know if Lia Thomas, for example, has dysphoria or not. If it's I don't want to invalidate her transness if she doesn't have dysphoria, and if she's okay with presenting in an androgynous way, or any like non-binary whatever way that she wants to present as, and that would be valid as well. And maybe that would give credence to the idea of like balancing your gendered characteristics with your performance. Which is why I was talking about dysphoria, because in the case of dysphoria, it's pretty clear then. Someone who actually has dysphoria is not going to try to do like some weird balancing act with their gendered body characteristics, is my understanding. But someone who doesn't have dysphoria but is trans might perhaps be willing to do that. I don't know.
Things I could unpack here, but I think I've done a fairly sufficient job of elucidating that even if you had max suppression through total anti-androgenic activity with this like relatively, I don't know, like I don't think it's that, you know, efficacious of an anti-androgen, to be honest. And I've dug into this with elaborate detail in hair loss research. For the most potent anti-androgens, have the greatest binding affinity, the greatest binding constant, response elements, etc. Have the most anti-gonadotropin activity, or steroidal, non-steroidal in structure, silent antagonist, etc. And this is not that potent of an anti-androgen. But again, with estrogen therapy, you can crush your levels to that of a physiologic, you know, woman, biological female. But even if that was the case, and Lia Thomas is taking the max dose for maximum, you know, transition potential, anti-gonadotropin activity, that is the maxed out it could be, the highest dose possible that is safe to use, there are still permanent changes that cannot be overlooked, in my opinion. So let's let her cap it off here, and then we'll wrap up the video.
Now, and so it was a weird adjustment and a lot of just kind of unknown and comparing day by day, where I'd go times in practice and my coach would be like, well, it was way off what you used to do, but for now, I think it's good. And so there's just, and so over time, it's gotten easier as I have been on hormones for longer. I have more sort of times to compare it to, rather than comparing everything to pre-transition times, which aren't really accurate to, I guess, my current ability.
Okay, so that is, you know, I don't think I have a whole lot more to add to that. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Like, overall, my opinion is that.
And so over time, it's gotten easier as I have.
Yeah, this is about Lia Thomas.
Been on hormones for longer. I have more sort of times to compare it to, rather than comparing everything to pre-transition times, which aren't really accurate to, I guess, my current ability.
Okay, so that is.
And he's not even going to address that. After lambasting her for after lambasting her for like basically accusing her of like doping, he's not going to address the fact that she herself admits, hey, my performance has gone down. By the way, okay, so this guy actually did bother doing research, like listening to her interview, but he couldn't be asked to like actually read the Sports Illustrated interview.